Thank you, Reverend Elizabeth. I mean, if you don't have a subscription to this magazine, I highly recommend it because there's some very, very powerful words in this from various teachers. It's not just Ernest Holmes. I mean, there's a group of ministers and lay people that put these together every month. So it doesn't come from the same person. It doesn't come from the same experience every month. So I highly recommend it. It's very cool to have. I've got a pile of them in my office, probably 2 feet tall from past subscription. There's always something. Anyways, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today on this beautiful Sunday morning. I am actually in Stark, Florida at the Montgomery Presbyterian Center at a women's retreat for recovery. There's 22 of us here, and and my sponsor happens to have like 32 years of sobriety, and there's gals that are just starting out with less than a year. So it's really been a super powerful, relaxing weekend in the sun, people cooking for us, bunking up like we did as kids at summer camp with 2 in a room and the communal shower, the big bathrooms with 20 sinks in it. It's like, but I got to do the meditation yesterday, so that was pretty powerful. So it's just been a beautiful, my cup is full today, and then getting to talk today, it's pretty, I'm so happy to be here. But this week's theme was given that I'll sleep when I'm dead. And it's funny, when we were younger, when I was younger, and I kind of polled some of the ladies, when we were sitting around this weekend, it's like, when did you say that? And everybody's like, I would say, my talk title this week is I'll sleep when I'm dead. And they're like, oh, I used to say that all the time. And then we were just crazy, right? Running the streets and didn't sleep and didn't eat very healthy and did all kinds of crazy things. But it's like, now it's like, what would happen if we chose to rest before we were dead? What if we slowed down a little bit and kind of did some really deep work? And it's so funny when I saw this title, Robert regularly looks at me and he's like, I don't know how you do it. He's like, your calendar is so full. You're always running around. It's like, I don't know when you stop. But right now, my calendar, my life is filled with things that bring me joy and bring me peace, and are setting me up for a future after the busyness of work to really have a fulfilled and sustained life. So I'm super excited about everything that's going on. But we talk about the hustle, of the things that we're told we have to do when we get out of high school, when we go to college. It's like, we got to go the hustle. It's like, most people I know in St. Augustine, especially including myself, we wear multiple professional hats. We're doing 6 things, nobody does one job anymore. My parents, right after school, they got a single job and they did that one job their entire lives, right? Very rarely did they change, but now, we're job hopping and we have 4 jobs because we can't seem to get enough. We need to do the most. We're told we need to do the best. Our culture of the hustle and rushing around, in reality, it's just trying to counter our belief in lack. As we join, it's very apropos, I guess is the word, on Sunday, this traditional biblical day of rest, right? That's when we stop. That's when we rest. That's when we slow down. And it's great that at least that nugget of history has continued in our psyche, that Sunday tends to be the quieter day and the restful day. And we're encouraged in these moments to examine what we think we lack. Do we not have enough money? Do we not have enough resources? Do we not receive enough praise? It doesn't have to be the tangible physical things. It can be attention. It can be love. It can be all those things that we find ourselves I don't have enough. I have to go find it. I don't have a fulfilling relationship. I have to go find somebody to fill that hole, And we know from the principles of our teaching from Ernest Holmes that there is always enough. There's always enough, but sometimes that truth gets drowned out by the rush of the busyness, busyness of life, of kids, of jobs, of everything around us. And in that frenzy, we can hide from our feelings, or unconsciously or consciously, too busy to heal those damaged relationships, to have those difficult conversations, to devote time and energy to self-reflection. That self-reflection that will move us forward in our spiritual awakening in a real way, to become that humble vessel of divine love filled with an endless supply. I love that sentence. That's going to become like part of my sentences in my dictionary, in my tool bag, to remind myself that I am a vessel of divine love. What does that look like? How does that feel? For me, those words, that doesn't equal, working 80 hours a week, to fill a bank account. That doesn't, there's a lot of things that doesn't mean, I feel that sentence will be a good check for me to like internal conversations of, what am I doing and why am I doing it, right? Why do we hide from rest? Because in rest, we can truly see ourselves. We're not sure we really want to deal with that. We don't want to necessarily see what's in there. After years and years of just being wide open and doing whatever we feel we need or want to do, sometimes that self-reflection can be pretty deep. Brene Brown says it takes courage to say yes to rest and play in a culture where exhaustion is a status symbol. When we work ourselves into, physical and mental exhaustion, and you can ask any American, say, I've heard this before and it's pretty funny, you can ask any American, who are you? And our answer will be, I'm an accountant, I'm a mother, I'm a teacher, I'm an iron worker, I'm a carpenter, whatever, right? And you ask people in other cultures, they say like, I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a poet, I'm a painter. So they focus on, other cultures focus on the creative aspects of who we are and not who we are in the grind. How do we make our money? How do we do all these things? And I feel people who get to be paid to do the things that bring them joy and still feel the joy in it as they're doing it are some very, very lucky people, because most people don't get to do that. My life is very full, with beekeeping and gardening and practitioner stuff. And I'm about to take an end of life doula course to be there for that part of the transition in life. And then I get to start ministerial training in May, but very rarely, and I thought of that this weekend, it's like, I never talk about my job. I never talk about the thing that allows me to do all the other things that I get to do, because to me, my job is not my life. My job is not who I am. All of these other things make up who I am. And that's a big change for me over the last like 10, 12 years, I think. But yeah, it's been really cool. There are so many things that we can hide from, in those moments. Today we're going to talk about those relationships. We talk about those difficult conversations, but there's so many other things we don't have enough time, to talk about it all. So we're just going to talk about, a little bit of relationships. This work calls on us to dig into where our behaviors come from. Decide where our part is in the damaged relationship and clear the wreckage of our past. This work allows us to build a concrete foundation, when we do this work. And what we don't notice, or what I didn't notice when I started this work, I thought, I'm solid, I'm good. But when you really start digging in and peeling that onion of how we've been our entire lives, it's a lot shakier than I imagined it could be. It's on that little sandy that little sand part where it just kind of like life erodes little by little until you look down and you're like, holy cow, I've got no foundation whatsoever. And I'm like, ah. But this work allows concrete, something solid to be put underneath me to have that jumping off, that place, especially with an impartial support system. You know, for example, our minister, you know, or another practitioner, you know, or in recovery, a sponsor, you know, or another addict, another alcoholic, another drug addict, another, you know, overeater, another anything that ties to a 12-step program allows us the trust to have these hard conversations with someone that isn't super close to us, that isn't a family member, that isn't a spouse. That's actually the last person you want to have these conversations with, by the way, because a lot of times it is that person, and it allows us to heal us from the inside, as we can share our deepest feelings about any situation. And again, build that foundation where we can jump off into a more fulfilled and peaceful life. Because ultimately, that's what we want, right? We want peace. You know, we think we want money, we think we want joy, we think we want happiness, but ultimately we want peace. You know, we want to stay off the edges. You know, Mickey Singer talks about, you know, the pendulum of extreme joy and the other side of extreme anger. You know, they're the two sides of the same coin, right? You know, people that are driving for joy, of happiness, of adventure, of things, that's just the same thing of anger and despair and depression. So Mickey Singer's like, you want to be in the middle, you want to be in the Tao, and that's the goal. And you know, practitioners, ministers, you know, we're trained to help you apply spiritual principles and solutions to the things that block us from seeing and experience our wholeness and oneness. And that's why I love Reverend Elizabeth, because her whole is hammered. It's like oneness and wholeness, oneness and wholeness. If you can't say anything else, you say oneness and wholeness. If you can't live anything else, you're oneness and wholeness. And that allows that center, that spine, that like, of like, okay, if I can remember who and what I am, and I am one and whole, and I am one with God, I am spirit, I am joy, I am light, nothing else can get in there. You know, we've filled up all the holes that seep out our energy and seep out who our true essence actually is by doing this work. And it's tough, you know, and Ernest Holmes says in Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life, to enter the silence is to quiet our minds and enter that place of non-movement. Non-movement mentally, non-movement physically, non-movement energetically. To be still and know that I am God is to enter in the sanctuary of one's own consciousness. Right? To enter the silence is to quiet our minds and enter that place of non-movement. To be still and know that I am God is to enter into the sanctuary of one's own consciousness. Okay, I would really love that place. I really love that knowing that I can go there at any point. You know, I can be sitting at a traffic light and I can go to that place. I can be sitting in a crowd of people and go to that place. You know, and it's not a place of sadness. It's not a place of withdrawing. It's actually filling my tank back up. It's filling that heart space back up. So then I can go back out into the world and I can be liked. I can be loved, because I can't share it. I can't give it if I don't have it myself. I think that's the difference between, you know, teaching and being. You know, we may not like what we see when we first get started. You know, we are clouded with the thoughts of victimhood and fear and anger. And a lot of those things start coming up, and, you know, we may even be uncomfortable, agitated, and even really sad when we start this reflective work. Like I said, by the time we get to this point to decide we need to do this work, the foundation is gone. You know, we're already feeling like super off balance. We're like, why am I sick all the time? Why am I sad all the time? Why am I depressed all the time? It's like, you know, and then hopefully someone comes into our lives and says, well, have you thought about some self-reflection work? You know, how's your meditation practice? You know, where is your higher power? Where is God in your life? Where is, you know, and when we're ready to hear it, the answer is, oh. And you get quiet and you're like, okay, maybe that's something I want to look at. Or if we're not ready, it's like, whoa, what are you talking about? And then it becomes very noisy and chattery, right? You know, the ego at this point is very strong and loud because it's feeling the threat of no longer being in charge. When we decide to turn to the light, we turn to the love, we turn to God, we turn to spirit, whatever you want to call it. The ego is like, wait a minute, I'm over here. Don't forget about me, you know, but that's fear. And that's the lack that Ernest Holmes talks about. That's the limitation that Ernest Holmes talks about, you know, and I assure you, from someone who has had those feelings and emotions of victimhood and fear and anger, it really sucks sometimes. And it's really hard sometimes. There's a lot of tears, but they are tears of cleansing and the path that led to understanding who I am, and more importantly, why I am. You know, once I became the observer instead of the victim of my circumstances, it presented a whole new outlook on life. You know, once I looked at the people that were in my life at the very young age and did the forgiveness work of understanding they did the best they could with the tools that they had, allowed me to like, okay, you know, if we treat it like a sick friend, it's like, I would not talk to a sick friend the way I talk to myself sometimes. You know, you know, we're so terrible to ourselves, so mean and so hard. You know, we wouldn't be friends with us a lot of times. We would have been like, get out of my life. I do not want you. I do not need you. But, you know, everywhere I go, there I am. You know, it's just like everywhere I go, there I am. You know, it has presented me with a whole new outlook on life. And that came from clearing out the sand, clearing out the wreckage, clearing out the fear and the anger and the cobwebs of complacency, and rebuilt it with the foundation of the solidness to become that vessel of divine love, divine light. You know, when I can slow down and reflect and turn within, you know, I also get to decide how I move through these feelings and emotions. You know, if I continue to hide in the busyness of life to avoid having those feelings and emotions, they will eventually squish out at the most inopportune times, at the most inopportune, in emotional outbursts, in sickness, depression, anger, anxiety, you know, lashing out to friends and family. I mean, we eventually don't have the choice of keeping all that stuff bottled in, especially when the cracks start forming, when you start hearing things that inspire the God self, you know, the inward self, and then the light starts coming through, and then we try and scoop it all back in. You know, we're like, oh, I don't want to talk about that right now. But eventually it will come out, and it may not be pretty. It may be kind of ugly, but it will come out. You know, and when I get to be the observer, when I get to decide that I'm no longer I'm no longer the victim, but I get to see what's happening from an outward perspective, it allows me to know that things are bubbling up instead of bubbling up first and catching me off guard and then having to then apologize or having to go back and like, oh man, I am so sorry. You know, it allows me to make those choices before, you know, there was a there was a meditation we did this morning, and there's that gap between what's happening and my reaction to it. And in that reaction is God, if we choose. And we can choose the anger, or we can choose the outburst, or we can choose to be quiet, and we can choose to decide that we're going to answer in love instead of fear. Right? My two favorite things in the world, it's like there are only two. There's fear and there's love. There's nothing in between. You can name it whatever you want. You can call it whatever you want. But if it's not love, it's fear. Hands down. And I will argue that point until I am in the ground. So, but you know, and it's served me well. It has served me well. You know, the regular sessions with a minister or a practitioner, you know, it also leaves room for maintaining boundaries and emotional stability. You know, the homework in between these meetings allows for focus on things you want to work on and bringing them up later in a safe and loving manner. You know, when this spigot gets open, you know, it's like drinking from a fire hose. I can tell you from experience, because it just like everything starts rushing out. But when I can have like that moment in time to be able to then, okay, so I have a meeting on Mondays at 7 with Reverend Elizabeth. I know that anytime before then, you know, I get to do my homework, but then I know at 7 o'clock on Monday, all I have to do is bring my heart and my willingness and a box of tissue. And then I can just, I can let it all out. And then she helps with the spiritual principles behind healing whatever it is. And then at 8 o'clock, I get to go home and I get to like think about what's happened and think about what we talked about, knowing that nothing that I've told her is going outside of this conversation. And then it heals. And then the next thing will come up, you know, as we peel the onion and we think we've got it healed, and then we get triggered, surprisingly, like, wow, I thought I healed that. Like, well, maybe not. So then we go back, you know, and each time it goes a little bit more, and it goes a little bit more, a little bit more. It lays that foundation a little bit more. And then before you know it, it's like, okay, that's gone, because it doesn't happen anymore. For me, that's how I know that something is healed. When I can experience that and it doesn't trigger me, or it doesn't happen anymore. You know, so, you know, we're shown in this practice, in this teaching, which is why we're all here, right? That all are one, all is God, and all is love. It isn't something that can be taught. It can only be discovered through the path of sacred stillness that sustained rest allows. You know, and I really got to experience that this weekend, this sustained rest. We had a period of 4 hours where there was nothing planned. And we all looked at each other like, 4 hours? Like, what in the world are we going to do for 4 hours? And a bunch of us went to the lake and we read, you know, a bunch of people got in the canoes and we went to the labyrinth. There's this huge labyrinth here that we went and walked, and we just sat on the porch and talked and drank more coffee in 2 days than I've drank in a month. And we just, it was amazing. It was just in that stillness. And I think until we're forced into it, we don't really realize what we're missing, right? If we don't ever experience it, we can't say that we're lacking in anything. But once you get that taste of being quiet, of being still, you know, being rested, we want more of it after, because it's so powerful. You know, in this recognition, we're invited by Spirit to become a revealer of truth, which appears as intuition, sacred knowingness, and a deep yes to all that is good. Oh, that just makes me so good. You know, it brings us peace that passes all understanding. and empowers us to be a beneficial presence for all that we meet. You know, we want to be that person that comes into a room and people are like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. Not, oh my God, I'm going the other way. You know, because there's been times where we've all been those people, right? You know, we're kidding ourselves if we haven't, if we say we've never been that person, you know, but, you know, it allows us to show up. You know, in recovery, step 12 talks about service. And we can't talk about others, about a spiritual awakening, if we not done the work ourselves. You know, it's an experience and it's a lifestyle. It's not just a textbook. It's not just, you know, a recorded YouTube, you know, listening to YouTube videos or reading books or taking classes. It becomes an experience. And to be of service, you have to have done that work. You have to have built that foundation. You have to have cleared that wreckage and experienced healing those tough relationships that we're talking about today. And it becomes a whole nother experience. You know, we get to practice all we've learned before we can guide others through the process. You know, that's the joys of this teaching. And for me to be able to hand in hand that with recovery has been nothing I've ever experienced in my entire life. You know, this work allows us to approach service in a manner that looks more like a shared journey of what works for us. You know, you can use what you wish and create your own path instead of what a lot of us are used to, of someone telling us what we're doing wrong and how to fix it. You know, hopefully that makes sense. You know, we've all had that happen before. It usually ends up us digging in more and not being productive or beneficial, or some behavior outcropping, you know, out of spite. You know, you don't tell me what to do. You know, don't tell me how to show up. You know, but this allows more of a shared experience, right? You know, there's nothing worse than being told what to do by someone who is not living a spiritual life. It comes completely different. It sounds different. It feels different. Because to surround ourselves with people who are on this journey and having a spiritual connection to God, it becomes a conversation instead of a one-sided to-do list. Right? Not to say we don't get a kick in the pants every once in a while when, you know, it's just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? But it's from a place of love, and it's not from a place of anger or disappointment, you know, because we don't want to disappoint anybody ever, especially ourselves. But it allows us to do things differently. You know, we will experience the same lessons over and over again until we answer them differently. I guarantee it. I've experienced it. You know, and I'm sure if you think back to things that have happened in your lives, you will have had that same thing too. And it may be after 3 or 4 times when you've finally chosen differently, you can see back to like, oh, I saw that there, and I saw that there, and I saw that there. It's like, why do these things keep happening? And that's usually when the time for self-reflection comes in, is within those moments of, why is this happening again? I don't understand. Then we can stop and we can rest and we can reflect and we can remember who and what we are, and we can decide wholeness and oneness over fear and anger and separation. You know, spirit knows no time or space. None. So guess what? What's not learned in this lifetime, I believe, will be experienced over and over again. So losing this shell does not exclude us from learning the lessons that we're supposed to learn. In my opinion, you know, we all may have different thoughts on that, but for me, that really resonates and it makes sense. Until then, You know, we as your practitioners and ministers, we're here to help and support you through that journey, you know, with love and understanding and compassion. You know, that is beyond understanding. And we are so grateful to be here and to look out over the woods and be able to be here today has been super powerful, and I'm super grateful, and I appreciate everyone being here. Thank you.